to come take the limb down that's been laying on the electric line across the street to my house.
If you'd like,
Bucket truck.
if you do the sunshine, then Tony and I will run with like you discussed.
Okay. We have a quorum, looks like.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so assuming that this meeting has been properly sunshined,
That's correct.
then let's just dig in. Thank you for your commitment, everybody, to arriving at a budget figure for the next fiscal year. Take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make a couple general comments and then we'll do the commission piece. Then due to some timing with Mary, we'll jump into the testing and Mary will do the UPenn part and I'll wrap up with the rest of the testing. A couple parameters here. The goal here is to provide information on the proposed budget request, keyword request. What the commission decides ends up getting sent downtown and it's a request. Secondly, there's no administrative action today by the commission. The commission is in the process of reviewing everything, reviewing the proposed request. The earliest any action could possibly take place is September 24th, and that's possible, not definite. Today, I'll run through this with Tony's help. If you have some comments, feel free to make them. If you don't want to make the comments today, feel free to either email or call Tony or I, and we'll be happy to bring the comments back to the commissioners. Okay? So we'll start with...
Tom, before we go any farther, I've been asked to do a roll call so that we know the commissioners who are on the line for the sake of folks who don't have video.
Okay. Commissioner Brentheiser? Commissioner DeBunda? I see Commissioner DeBunda. Commissioner Ellis?
I connect to my mic, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner DeBunda. Commissioner Hoffman? Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Lark?
Present.
Commissioner Rogers?
Here.
Commissioner Ruddy?
Here.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Present.
Back to Commissioner Hoffman. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
All right, moving on. We'll start with the commission. We'll start with the personnel services. The 2025 request is a little over $6,250,000. That is a $250,000 increase from the 24-25 budget. I think there are two things to note with this. One, and we discussed this in the past, the raise in the union contract kicks in, which is 2.25 that starts next year. In addition, we have a significant amount of open positions to fill. Depending on the financial structure of this, we may or may not fill it, but this is spending authority. This allows us to spend up to this level, but generally speaking, in the past, we never reached that level. Under travel and training, it is $125,000, which is more aligned with what we actually spent in 23-24. This is another discretionary item based on the revenue stream. We'll constantly look at that. IT is flat at 575, which matches the 24-25 budget. Moving on to specialized services, it's 115,000, which is 15,000 more than the budget. Items that fall under specialized services are fingerprinting, security, specifically the Capitol Police, and some property costs. Those are the major items that make up the 115,000. Under other specialized services, 30,000. Those are allocated to background checks. When people make a license, we do a background check on many of them, and that's the cost of that we anticipate. Professional services not specified, that's 50,000. It's a little 10,000 less than the budget. This is the photo finish service that's provided for all the fairs. This is the majority of the 50,000 goes to Gretchen, who provides the photo finish service at the fairs. Contracted maintenance, or let's see, where are we here? Medical, mental, and dental services is 10,000, the same as the budget. Contracted maintenance is 30,000. That aligns with 23-24. That's maintenance agreements we have for certain pieces of equipment. Advertising is 2,000. That's basically something if we need to advertise, we may or may not spend it. Vehicles is 25,000. Office equipment and supplies is 75,000. That's 5,000 up from the budget. That speaks for itself. The equipment and supplies we need to run the commission side of this. The rest of the items under publication and subscription are the same as the 24-25 budget. We're up slightly in miscellaneous, 2,000. Postage and freight is 25,000, same as the 24-25 budget. Printing is the same. Conference expenses are up 10,000. That will be a discretionary item, and depending on the revenue stream, it may be cut. Food is the food that is provided for the meetings. Insurance and surety bonds, that's the insurance. The other operational expenses under treasury, that is a treasury charge for processing any kind of payments. That's not only allocated to us, but it's allocated throughout the whole Commonwealth. If you take a look at interfund reimbursements, that's 650,000. Those are services that the Commonwealth provides for HR, IT, the comptroller's office. There's a formula, an FFE formula that's done. At this point in time, after discussing with Jason downtown, this is an estimate. The calculation is not done. Once the calculation is done, I will provide the details of the calculation to the commission. Bottom line is,
Tom, can we go back to the personnel services? I just want to, we've talked this past year about having these people who take blood. I forgot what you're calling them. Are they included in new personnel, or what are they included or not included?
I'll get to that. It's on the testing side.
All right, so it's only, so that they're not on this, they're not reflected on this budget at all.
They're not reflected on the commission side. Remember,
Okay.
they draw blood and provide services in the test barn. That will show up in the testing budget, and I'll get to that in the next stage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So bottom line for the commission, there's a $505,000 increase over 24-25, which is about 6%. About 60% of that increase falls between personnel and the interfund reimbursements. Any questions so far on the commission piece?
Since he did ask about the personnel, can you tell us exactly what, not exactly, but in general terms, what employees are included in the commission budget?
In the commission budget, if you remember, 4 years ago, we did a time study. So keep that in mind. The people that are involved would be the office upstairs. They're in the commission budget. Tony and I, the majority of our salaries is in the commission budget. Who else is in there?
Judges and stewards.
All the judges, all the stewards are in there. The majority of the pay for the special investigators, the field investigators, the office staff at the racetracks are in there. And I'm probably missing a few, but that's the general makeup of that.
Are the vets included
No.
part or not?
No,
I thought
the
they-
vets will fall under the testing because, well, I should rephrase that. There's a piece of the vets that are in here, but the
Yeah.
lion's share of the vets fall under testing.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the commission piece?
Under travel,
I have a question when you finish. Just
One
last-
second, Commissioner DeBonda. Commissioner Brennheiser's up.
I couldn't hear him.
Question is, under the travel and training, how do we stand this year so far on, our budget was 65. Do you know kind of where we stand at this point on against that budget?
At this point, I don't. I can happily look it up for you, Commissioner, and I'll get that back to you, get you that information.
I'd be curious, because, we're doubling the figure for 25, 26. And I understand that we spent 106, 23, 24, but it is an area that I think that needs to be watched, in terms of what are you using that for, basically?
Basically, it's if you're going to conferences, if you're going out to different, depending, if you're going out on a licensing matter, if you travel track to track with Tony does, or I do, or Jason does, or somebody upstairs, that's part of it. What I suggest to you is I will look at July and August's statement for you when I get August, and I'll be able to report back to you where we stand in 24, 25 against the 65,000.
Okay, because I had some questions from some of the horsemen about specifically a trip that they didn't understand, and I'm sure it was a pretty costly trip. But anyway,
We could probably talk about Jason and the English trip, but that wasn't the commission. That wasn't the commission expense, I don't believe.
it wasn't.
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you.
That's your
Okay.
Go
Go ahead, Commissioner DeBonda.
Yeah, this is my last question. Down back, the total here is for 25, 26 is according to this $506,000 more. The budget back in 24, 25 was 7,680,000. Was that in the 14 million that was approved back then? I just want to compare apples and apples here. But not the 14 million, I'm sorry.
Commissioner DeBonda, the budget that this commissioner approved in downtown accepted for the current year, 24, 25, the year we're in right now, was 7,680,000. That's for the commission piece. The piece I think you're talking about for 24, 25 comes in the next page, talking about testing at 14,845,000. We'll get to that in the next
Okay,
page.
so-
Strictly the commission.
Can you tell us how the commission did versus budget? Do you know that number?
Well, for 24, 25, okay, we're in 24, 25.
Yeah. I
So
know
you
that.
have basically, are you asking for 23, 24?
No, I'm asking for 24, 25. How are we doing in that budget?
Yeah, I've gotten, Commissioner DeMunda, I've gotten one statement so far for July. I'm waiting on August statement. It's premature for me to tell you after a month I've seen one statement in a month.
Okay.
You got 10 more months to go. So for me to say
Okay.
how we're currently comparing to the year we're in, I can't tell you that right now, Commissioner.
Okay. But you can tell me what the prior year was, correct?
The prior year is the actual for 23, 24 was 7,259,000
Okay. So it's actually used the actual number there.
for 2 years or for
So
23.
it says actual, not budget on the top heading. So-
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry.
Anyone else with questions on the commission budget, budget request, proposed budget request? Not hearing any. With your agreement, Madam Chair, we'll move on to the testing.
Yes, yeah, let's do that.
What I'd like to do is, in the testing, there's a line UPenn contract, the 25-26 budget request is $7,840,000. Dr. Robinson is on the call. I'd like to turn it over to her at this juncture, and she can lay out the backdrop for the $7,840,000. When she's done, then I'll walk through the rest of the items on the testing budget proposed request.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, commissioners. I'm going to try to share my screen so that it's available to be observed, the budget request, hopefully by everybody. Is that visible now on Teams?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you. Okay. So I've got some good news for this budget proposed for fiscal year 26. We had underspending in operational in fiscal year 24. And so you'll see that there's actually a 3% decrease under operational expenses for the request for fiscal year 26. Now, we did have increased spending under personnel due to some of the personnel changes. So we've had the last couple of years, the merit-based increases have been more than the 3% that traditionally in the past we've budgeted because of the changes going on and economically. So this past year, it was a 3.75% increase July 1st. And the budget here that you're seeing for the personnel, this is projecting a 4% increase for fiscal year 26 using the actual salaries for fiscal year 25. The other change under personnel is that hopefully I am expecting a promotion this next year. So we've budgeted for that increase that is traditionally goes along with that promotion. We also had a management change. My senior forensics manager retired this past year. And so we did some restructuring, and I have 4 chemists that are under the drug testing line who stepped up to serve as leads in various areas in the lab. And so those 4 chemists received a 10% salary increase for stepping up into those management roles. And then so I think those are the primary changes under personnel that have to do with the testing side of things. One additional request I have under personnel has to do with research. And so historically, we've had funding for our PenVet Equine Biobank, graciously supplied by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. Unfortunately, that cannot continue at this time due to constraints on their budget, and frankly, because the horses, the PA breds, are doing so well. And so I have completely spent out the PenVet Equine Biobank money, and I was asking to change one of the drug testing positions that we currently had in fiscal year 25 under drug testing. I'm asking for permission to use that for a research position to continue to support the PenVet Equine Biobank manager in going forward. So that is for the commission to consider. And then you'll see that change under the research line as well as under the drug testing line, where the position has been shifted into research for fiscal year 26. That is the request. Overall for personnel, this ends up being about a 7% increase in personnel. As I mentioned, in operational, we've got a 3% decrease. For equipment, this is our traditional ask. I usually go back and forth between a $500,000 ask and a $600,000 ask to allow us to replace the mass spectrometers that are aging and outdated. One of the companies that we use is a little bit cheaper than the other, and so we've been swapping. We're about 50-50 for the 2 instruments. They each have their pros and cons, and we really need both. So that's why there's an increase asked for fiscal year 26 for instrumentation. Travel expenses, I increased by 3%. We've been within our travel budget. And the admin is the 12% that we've been asking historically for. So overall, the 7.84 is a 4% increase over fiscal year 25. And that is consistent with what I presented last year when we discussed the addition of HIWU and what was going to be needed for HIWU. So we may be able to have some savings on that in the future if we continue to underspend in operational. We'll be looking at that carefully, but that's where we are currently. As far as the change or the distribution between testing and research, we are about the same. We've got an increase in total. The subtotal for testing is 5.9. The subtotal for research is 1.9. We did ask for a little bit more in research because some of our research expenses, especially with the herd, feed and hay, as I'm sure most of you know, costs have all gone up considerably. So I shifted a little bit of monies into the research costs to cover those increases for the research herd. Of course, the other increase in the research cost is the person that I'm requesting to support for the PenVet to be able to continue the PenVet equine biobank. Are there any questions?
I want to go back to my initial question I had misplaced. These people we're bringing on board to take the samples, are they in this personnel package?
No, Commissioner, these are laboratory personnel. So all of these people work at either at New Bolton.
Well, Tom, where are these people?
They will come up when I go. I will outline them, Commissioner DeBunda, when Mary's done and I go line item by line item. I'll be happy to point out where they are.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies for jumping in ahead. I have to teach at 11, and so Tom wanted me to go first.
Is there any other questions for Dr. Robinson before we continue with the budget presentation on the testing? Not hearing any, Madam Chair. Would you like me to Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mike Durant's in the room.
I'm just wondering, cost on standard bread is so much more than. Hi, Dr. Robinson. I'm just wondering why the standard bread cost of research is so much.
It's a great question. So the reason for that is that the research costs are split up based on total sample numbers. So we have of all the samples that we receive, 60% of those are standard bred samples, 40% of those are thoroughbred samples. And so that's the research costs have always historically been split based on total numbers of samples analyzed for the two different breeds. For drug testing, when HIWU came on board, the HIWU costs were allocated to the thoroughbreds only. And so that's why that same split does not occur under drug testing. The thoroughbreds take up a greater proportion of that cost due to the HIWU federal mandate that only applies to thoroughbreds.
All right, are there any other questions?
Hang on a minute,
Does
Commissioner.
that relate to research?
We can't hear the questions on Zoom or on Teams.
Dr. Robinson, the question is they understand it, but the reason, I guess the way I would ask this, and if I'm wrong, Mike, just tell me.
Yeah.
That Mike wants to know how you came up with that formula based on what's the tie-in between samples and research. Why would the samples have an effect on the research cost? Is that fair, Mike?
Yeah.
How
So the research applies. Yeah, I think I understand the question. The reason we use sample number to split up those costs between thoroughbreds and standard breds is because the research applies to both breeds. So that was thought to be the fairest way to distribute the cost of the research.
Let me ask,
I still don't understand. Do you, Michelle?
No.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
We don't understand, you know, what you're saying.
Excuse me if I may, I think what she's saying is that any research that is done will result in something that they will test for, and that then ties in with the number of tests being conducted.
I think we need a better explanation because,
let me,
again, I don't even understand how research applies to testing. I mean, yeah.
can I
think
make
we
a
could
suggestion? Can I make a suggestion, Commissioner Brunheiser?
Take your word?
Can I make a suggestion?
Right.
Let Tony and I work with Dr. Robinson to put this in some kind of format that is easily understood. Okay, there's two pieces to this, how she's doing it, correct? You want an explanation, then that opens the discussion if you think it is fair and equitable in the manner that she's doing it, correct? Are those your two questions? Am I? So what I would suggest, because as I said in the beginning, this is a proposed request, first off. Secondly, there's no administrative action till at the minimum the 24th. That will allow Tony and I time to work with Dr. Robinson to provide this information in some kind of format that's more readily understandable. Is that acceptable to you, Commissioner?
Well, it seems I'm not the only one that don't understand, so.
No, you raised the question, so I'm just saying, if that's acceptable, we'll work with Dr. Robinson and put it in a format, hopefully, that you and Commissioner Ruddy and the others and Mike and so on can understand. Is that okay? Okay. So be prepared, Mary, to explain to Tony and I neophytes how this works.
No problem, and I apologize for the confusion. I certainly hope to clear that up for everybody.
Are we good on that, Commissioner Brunheiser, Commissioner Ruddy? Any other questions for Dr. Robinson? Mike, anything else? Hearing none, Madam Chair, I'll move on with your agreement.
Yes, please, that's fine.
So we're on the testing budget request. We'll start with personnel. Personnel is $250,000 higher than the 24-25 budget. Similar to the description I made on the personnel on the commission side, there's also union employees on the testing side, and that's 2.25%, same amount. To advise Commissioner Rogers of who's in this group, so I'll do that. The major components are the majority of the salary for the veterinarians, the livestock workers, security in the barns. There is a piece of Tony and my salary when we deal with drug testing and so on that goes to it. There's a piece of the judges and the stewards when they have hearings and so on is allocated to that. There's a piece of the investigators, a small piece that's allocated to that. And those are the general areas, the personnel. Thank you. You also should be aware, and you'll see this when I get down to medical and the contracted services, there's no doubt that we're short-staffed. It is hard to find veterinarians. That's not news to anybody on this call. And we're short livestock workers. So that's an ongoing struggle. And once again, the 5.250 million is a number that's spending authority. It allows us to spend up to that. I'm not quite sure we'll ever get there, but that's that. Travel and training is 135,000, which is roughly what it was in 23-24. On the testing side, okay, some of the charges come when we move veterinarians from track to track. We move livestock workers from track to track. So a piece of that is what's in the travel and training category, mainly the travel. Telecommunications is flat with the 24-25 budget. Specialized services, let me go back. Legal services and fees are 15,000. That's money that's allocated for when the lawyers and the legal officer handle hearings and so on like that. provide consultation to the Bureau, consultation to the Commission. Specialized services is 35,000. We cut it 15. In that category, there's also real estate charges, security charges, DGS charges, certain comptroller charges. Next item is the UPenn contract, and that's $7,840,000. Dr. Robinson went through that. The next two items, the medical, mental, dental service, and contracted services, I would take together. Okay, it's up about 75,000. As I described before, that we're short of veterinarians and so on. In these two categories, and we did it based on spending authority, is your veterinarians that are contracted veterinarians. And what do I mean by that? They're veterinarians that are not Commonwealth employees. They're not VMFOs. They're not temporary vets. They're contracted employees that we use to fill in since we've been so short of veterinarians. There's contracted vets that go to the fairs to cover the fairs because we have veterinarians at the fairs. They're vets we haven't had at the Meadows. I don't think a Commonwealth employee is a VMFO for almost 2 years now. So we have people that go and fill in those roles. So that's one major component of the medical, mental, and dental services and contracted services. And obviously, as we hire more people that become employees, that would move up to the top line of personnel, and this line would decrease. Okay. The other items that are in there is DAHIs. DAHIs are technicians. One of the things that the commission guided us and decided to do was, in the event you could not get enough veterinarians to do the blood draws and so on, DAHIs are technicians that work for animal health, that work for us, that draw blood. They're trained, they're tested, and they work under the auspices of the veterinarians at the racetrack. They fill an important part. It's one of the ways we can do the necessary testing and draws and pulls. So Commissioner DeBunda, they're in here. It's not a huge number, but they're in there, but it's a volunteer basis right now. We can't mandate because they have a job with animal health. But for example, and we don't use all these every night, we're in the process of training 6 in Region 6, I think it is. That's Penn National, that they can rotate in and out to fill. I think we're training 1 up at PID because we have no veterinarians up there to fill in. And as we progress down the line, we've made an agreement with the union as a letter agreement to keep it going. Next year, we'll look to expand it at Harrods and at Pocono and at the Meadows and at Chester. So that's in this. I cannot tell you, Commissioner, how much we've allocated. I'll be happy to find out for you, but that's where you'll see that number.
Good, thank you.
Vehicles are 40. That's a $5,000 decrease from a year ago, or from the budget for this year. Real estate, or let me see. Real estate, I jumped around. Real estate is $375,000. That is the rental fee for Westchester for the Petrol Lab. That's flat with last year. As I said, vehicles are 40. That's down 5,000. Office equipment and supplies is down 5,000 from the proposed budget for 24-25. Other equipment, rentals and leases is up slightly, 10,000. And that's basically the copiers and the equipment we use in the offices at the racetrack. Moving on, lab supplies, we dropped back to almost an actual for 23-24. We probably are a little high for 24-25. So we cut that by 150,000. Postage and freight's 125,000. Obviously the question, what's in that? Well, as everyone's aware, we ship samples every day from every racetrack to the lab. That's the major cost in postage and freight. Printing is 5,000. That's the same as it is in the budget for 24-25. Membership fees are 45,000. That's generally the USTA, RSI. I think there's an RMTC fee. Those are the industry organizations that the commission is a member. Conference expenses, 3,000, up slightly. Wearing apparel is 15,000. There's certain rules that the union has on what they have to wear, boots and so on. In the test barns, we allowed for an increase in cost. Obviously, everything is more expensive. It dropped down to the interfund reimbursements. Once again, this is up 87,000. It is an estimate. It is a calculation. It is not final. Similar to what I said under the commission, there will be a calculation done in a formula which I'll provide. This is for HR services, IT, and so on. There's a formula, and once I have it, I'll be happy to share. On the testing portion of this, there's a $648,000 increase from 24's to 25's budget. Approximately, you can see there's 2 or 3 main components that generate that increase. One's personnel, one is the UPenn contract, and one is the interfund reimbursements. And that, I think, is about, I want to say, a 5% increase roughly. Any questions on the testing in the budget request?
Yes. I guess what I want to say is I think you and Tom have done an excellent job in holding the line on these expenses. I think we must have been asleep when we approved the 24-25 budget, because that was a big number when we boosted it up to 4.8 for 24-25. Again, of this 648,000, almost half of it is UPenn. And as I look at these numbers, in 22-23, we were actual at 5.5, and we're looking at a figure of 7.8 this year. Needless to say, that's a $2.3 million increase. That's a big hit, and I'm just saying that I think we need to ask them to take a look at what they're doing for us, and in light of the current budget situation and the situation in racing, I just can't see how we can keep accepting these increases. That's just my feeling.
Thank you, Commissioner Brennheiser. Other comments or questions in regard to the testing?
I would agree with Darrell to the extent that he pointed out the difference between the actual this past year and the budget requests for next year, which is 24.5% increase. That is significant, and I think it needs to be considered.
Thank you, Commissioner Rogers. In line that has questions or comments. Mike, anything? So if I don't hear anything, what I would suggest is going to transpire over the next couple of weeks, as I said in the preliminary comments, if anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns, do not hesitate to forward them to Tony or myself. Understand that this is a budget request. This is still going through a process. You heard a couple of the commissioners in here raise some issues that we will look at. I'm sure we'll get some direction, Tony and I, to go back to UPenn and have a conversation with them. The next possible action may be September 24th, and you'll see it on obviously the agendas that go out ahead of time. But if there are no further comments, I'd like to thank everybody for participating, listening in, and we will keep you informed.
Tom, can I ask one question, since we're going to be, so there weren't a lot of questions from the horsemen or the horse association. Can I make sure that every one of them is present on this call, or who's not?
Well, you've got Mike Courant here, who basically, I'll say, for the harness side. Is that fair, Mike? I also will tell you that Jeff Matty, I believe, is on the phone for the PTHA. Tony has talked to Lee. I don't know if Lisa Dunn is on the call, but Tony has spoken to her, and I think she'll be looking into this. And I spoke to Todd yesterday, He had a previous engagement. He had another call, but I'm going to ship this off to him tomorrow. And I advised him if he or his horsemen have any questions, please comment to us and I'll bring it back to the commission.
Thank you, Tom.
Madam Chair, I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if there's no other comments or concerns. It's back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I appreciate everybody's thoughtful consideration of the request. At this point, hearing no further questions or concerns, I think I'll take a motion for adjournment.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Rogers had one question. There's an executive session today at 1 o'clock. Does anybody want to have an interest in moving it up, or do you want to wait till 1 o'clock? Go ahead, Ed, and weigh in.
I'm all for moving it up.
Well, I'm in favor of doing it now because I can't make the 1 o'clock.
All right, so let me make this suggestion. Let's hang up, shut it down, give us 15 minutes till 11 o'clock. Give us 15 minutes till 11 o'clock. We'll set up the computer, we'll change but log into the 1 o'clock one, okay? Don't log back into this number, commissioners. Log into the 1 o'clock and we'll start the executive session at 11 o'clock. Cheryl, is that okay with you?
Yeah, I have a 12:30, but I'm good until then, so I can make that work.
So we'll break here and we'll come back at 11 o'clock for the executive session.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll see you then.
All right, now, is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Commissioner Ruddy seconded it.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody said yes. We'll see you for the executive session at 1 o'clock. The next